Hi everyone. First I want to say that we're gonna try and do this entire thing in English, so this would be a fair warning. First of all, I want to thank Prince Queen for having us and having this discussion, and the organizer of the Center of Digital Art, the American Consulate for helping us fly in and have some great American participants. And I guess first and foremost, I would like to call the panelists to the stage for your introductions. I'll be by computer. Yes, it didn't work. Okay, so welcome to the panel on the aesthetics of the fake. I'm going to read out, I hope I do this right. We live in times where the line between the real and the fake are blurred beyond our recognition. For some of us, this is a daunting reality to be living in, as it jeopardizes our ability to trust anything. But for others, more marginalized, this new potential that lies within new technologies can serve as a tool that can help us level the playing field. Donna Haraway writes in her seminal Cyborg Manifesto that the cyborg can be an illegitimate offspring of the human, purposely unfaithful to this origin. The speakers in this panel, artists and designers, use new technologies to either represent the unrepresentable or expose the fetish behind the technological. They will each be presenting their work and also connecting it to the bigger subject at hand. Each panelist will do a short presentation, and then I hope we can open the panel to discussion. I will first introduce all of the speakers, and then they will each talk in turn. So now you will figure out what the order is. First on my left is Claudia Hart, that will be talking about the Real Fake Manifesto. Claudia is an artist and professor in film, video, new media, and animation at the Department of the Art Institute in Chicago, Illinois. Since 1988, Hart has worked as an artist, curator, and critic. She's a pioneer in the realm of 3D software, and she creates virtual representations that incorporate 3D pictures with photography, animation loops, and multi-channel animation in installations. Her work has appeared in various public institutions, including PS1 and PS 122 in New York, 01 Biennial in San Jose. Her works are uncanny and mesmerizing, and with the DIY aesthetic, she allows young makers to realize the potential of participating in the world of technology. Then, we will have LaJournée that will be showing a sample of her work, showcasing the way in which her practice offers representations to bodies that are often excluded from the political sphere. LaJournée is a queer, gender-fluid black femme new media artist, maker, and creative technologist living in New York. Her practice is dedicating to making art abstracted from her personal experiences, creating pieces that integrate performance, virtual reality, and physical computing to question our current use of technology in the form of communications. Her work is about interconnections and experience life beyond the material world. She has shown in Dance on Camera at Lincoln Center, Make a Fair, National Sawdust, Liberty Science Center, Chelsea Film Festival, Creative Tech Week, and Weird Reality. She's lead character animator for Neurospeculative Afrofeminism, which premieres on Sundance Film Festival and is currently touring at festivals like South by Southwest and Tribeca Film Festival. Then from simulation to fabrication, Pamela Lee will talk about how textiles shapes ancient cosmology, cognition, and technology. Pamela is a designer and writer living in Brooklyn, New York. Her works examines tension between craftsmanship, technology, and commerce, revealing hidden socio-political infrastructures undergirding human industry. Her research centers around recoupling the consumer with the producer through design literacy and mass customization, fostering intimacy and efficacy throughout a dialectical creation process. She's a recent graduate of the NYU ITP program, and she is currently developing a desktop Jacquard loom. And then last but not least, our local is Sharon Paz. Sharon is an experienced designer, new media artist, and space maker. He's one of the founders of Four Reel Studio that specializes in experience design and interactive, and he is the head of the Design and Technology course of the Master Program at Bethlehem Academy. These days, Sharon is invested in the development, research, and creation of spaces that combine storytelling, experiential space design, and technology in the area of products and platforms. Sharon is a graduate of HIT here in Hulon, right? And the department in the Sanders Institute. Samber Institute. Thank you. In Amsterdam. He has served as the head of the New Media Studies in Musrara, head curator of the Design Week in Jerusalem, and a leader of the Makers Fair in Israel. So thank you all for coming. Before I lead us to the panel, I want to end with a famous quote of Donald Rumsfeld, which I think will be an interesting way to kind of lean into this discussion. This is a famous quote by Rumsfeld where he responds to the critique of America's involvement with Iraq. He says, "Reports that say that something hasn't happened are always interesting to me, because as we know, there are no knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know that there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know there are some things we do not know, but there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know. And if one looks throughout the history of our country and other free countries, it is the latter category that tends to be the difficult one." Claudia.
I guess like oy vey.
Oy vey.
I don't know, if I can't do this also, I think you can hear me, can't you?
No, but it's better with the mic for the recording of the...
Oh, all right, I'm gonna try.
Okay.
Because I'm old and I'm blind, right? And I have to hold this paper as a clicker. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. So anyway, this thing that I'm presenting is Lior, our leader, who kindly invited me here, wanted me to do this. So I want to, disclaimer, it's sort of abstract.
Can you try to use it?
It's somewhat abstract. No, that would be horrible. Well, we can play it by ear.
I also
has to be
have
held
this
in right.
pointed to you, so you can just...
I can't see them.
Okay.
So, anyway, it's sort of abstract, and I will speak slowly, so forgive me. And I'm going to start very quick because this thing takes 9 minutes to present, so I'm almost through the first minute. But I did this project with Rachel Clark. It was an exhibition and then a website, an exhibition at Cal State. And we started the project in 2009. And it sort of took a life of its own. The site, we were invited to restage it a couple of years ago. And I'm mentioning this because it was all before Trump was elected. And the real fake kind of language hadn't gone viral yet. And I don't want to claim in any way that we were prophetic, but basically that it's embedded in the medium. And if you unpack the medium, you will come up with this kind of language, and what has been enacted in the past couple of years. Really?
Well,
are embedded in the process of what's happening. So let's start. Do you want me to say next, and then you'll click it, and then I don't have to do it?
sure.
Maybe? Then I can hold this. All right, so next. I'm going to read it, and very slowly. Part of this is that we made a PowerPoint manifesto, and we haven't published it intentionally, and it's meant only to be read and projected. So here we go. Oh, and I want to say one. What? Okay, how's that? Luckily, I have no stage fright, or I'd be freaking out right now. So all of the images also are artists' images. The Real Fake Project is actually an archive of the work of 60 artists. It was sort of randomly put together. It was 60 artists that I knew, and they are credited under the pictures. All right, so here we go. The paradigm of the indexical photographic image has been replaced by a new paradigm, the computer-generated one. It has broad cultural implications. Next, please. Can I throw them on the floor?
Yeah, you can go like this.
Yeah, that's for now. Yeah. All right. Next, please. The indexical photograph provides a physical link and visual likeness between the image captured and its subject. So for photographic image makers, capture technology embodies truth and authenticity, a moralizing position originating in the Enlightenment. Next, please. In Enlightenment thinking, empirical truth is what is learned through direct observation. At that time, it made that earlier phase of technological progress possible through scientific method. So Enlightenment thinking made indexical photographic representation both desirable and valuable. But now, technological change has shifted us into the digital age, one in which post-photographic simulation has superseded the indexical image, a paradigm shift that has often been met with cultural anxiety and hostility. In Simulations, Jean Baudrillard proposed 4 successive phases of representation, starting with the indexical image as a reflection of reality, and ending with the idea that the image has no relation to any reality, at which phase it becomes hyperreal. We believe, that's me and Rachel all the time, the paradigm of computer simulation proposes a modeling of the real, meaning building a parallel world inside the computer which has certain limits but suggests alternative possibilities at the same time. A model, while superficially less complex because it is less specific, nevertheless permits understanding the real in broader strokes and in terms of larger patterns of behavior. In other words, it proposes a different kind of truth than that proposed by post-Enlightenment empiricism, refined in modernism, the algorithmic. Due to its predictability, however, the algorithmic is limited, but it also is relational and therefore necessarily has more depth. The most positive outcome of this is the possibility of predicting futures and proposing realistic alternative ones. I like the throne. Our version of real fake is therefore potentially utopian, but still rests on the grounds of the empirical real. Baudrillard's position on simulation is cynical because he believed in the ethical superiority of the paradigm of indexical representation. Baudrillard's moralizing position was that the hyperreal had no relationship to the real, and that the ultimate consequence of this was that the hyperreal becomes seductive, a strangely fundamentalist judgment, making the hyperreal more desirable than the real and resulting in the desert of the real. We reject this line. In the new paradigm of the computer-simulated model, photography is virtualized. This means that the entry into 3D XYZ software space is through the gateway of its virtual camera, meaning the interface is modeled on a camera. Cameras in software environments are virtual models of digital cameras, which are computer-enhanced analog cameras. The virtual camera emulates rules of the real world, but in a symbolic manner. The virtual camera symbolically embodies a liminal space, an interface that enhances our physical bodies with a prosthetic extension. In virtual software, the model of the interface is that of a perspectival XYZ mathematical world that can only be accessed through a virtual camera. Imagine it as a cyborg human with a camera fixed to her head, an all-seeing camera that one can look through, yet functioning without light or the material world, constructing the user as an all-seeing eye of God. This virtual camera functions in a way similar to the early Renaissance concept of vanishing point, infinity, or heaven in the terms of that time. It is a fulfillment of Haraway's notion of the cyborg as a prosthetically enhanced superbeing with elevated consciousness. To counter Baudrillard's view, in which the virtual is considered fakery and inauthentic, the virtual experience actually expands our notions of perception, transforming how humans might conceive of the world and the body. It shifts perception itself, positing the question, what is more real? From this perspective, the virtual does not shut down culture. Instead, it becomes a new cultural paradigm. It also, from the point of view of ethics, proposes a radical humanism, making the cyborg, the computer-enhanced human, as significant and potentially powerful as ancient constructions of God. The future is in our hands. What we are proposing then is that post-photographic simulations collapse two primary cultural binaries: the empirical documentarian construction of modernism, meaning the photographic paradigm of cinema verite, and the Platonic mathematical model embraced by post-Judeo-Christian humanism. By this we mean a more fluid and liminal idea of computer-generated virtual space, a space beyond boundaries and binaries. It is a space grounded in the empirical, yet a function of its meta-modeling, a cyborging of models of the real and of the perceiving of the real. The model of space does not obey, this model of space does not obey the laws of optics, gravity, or physics, or the physical laws of bodies and nature as they once were before computer enhancement. Instead, the real fake proposes a total reevaluation of the visual, of the real, and of perception. Our idea of disrupting the norms of representation has a strong analogy in queer theory, where the social construction of dominant sexuality and gendered representation are interrogated. Queer scholarship also examines how those norms are actually defined by what is excluded. Our rejection of the norms of visual representation are a similar rejection of patriarchy and logocentric notions. In this case, the photographic, indexical capturing of the world we think we know carries the weight of a gendered history with exclusive ideas of progress we believe are no longer viable, arguing instead that what has been marginalized as the inauthentic other, the fake, can now be seen as a transformational space, and we propose it as a means to another possible future. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I think thinking around this manifesto that Claudia just presented, and into maybe another body of work that deals with representations and simulations, I want Lajane to come and show her work. Thank you. Do you want to just stay there and I'll play it? Because the mic's there.
Oh, okay. It's on
Or
the
no?
desktop.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Hello there. Yeah, so the first one. That one. Awesome. So, yeah, I'm a new media artist and I work at the intersection of performance and technology. So I'm just going to go through some projects that I've worked on. The first one's Ether. And this one was co-produced with students from the Interactive Telecommunications program, and basically we built controllers that allowed the audience to basically create a relationship with performers, and we used motion capture to also create an experience where the audience can have a relationship to the performers in real time. Basically, each element is based off of the 4 sacred elements in sacred geometry, and each one also has a controller that's based off of sacred geometry as well, and they're all like the 4 platonic solids. So this is all done in real time, and basically that's my collaborator Kat, and she's wearing a motion capture suit. And we basically took all of her data and sent it to Unreal, which is a gaming engine in real time. And we had the audience tell Kat exactly which element to be. The next project is 528.
Wait, I'm trying to turn off the lights. There's a lot of...
Oh, sorry. And this one is based off of...
Whoa.
Oh, cool. So with this project, I was really interested in what it would be like to communicate through love. So I made a dress, and I learned how to sew, and I created fabric flowers that took my heart rate, and it was able to like change everything that was happening in the room as I sat there. That's not me, clearly, but yeah, I did projection mapping on the dress, and all the projections were a mixture of imagery from the Hubble Space Telescope mixed with fractals that I made in Mandible. So this is a picture of the performance space. So my heart rate basically changed the video and imagery. It also changed the sound too. So it was connected to everything in the space. So this was the first like video. That's not me either, but yeah. But for the performance itself, as I sat in the space, it was very much like a come and go type thing. So people would come in and leave, and some people would stay and sort of like meditate with me, which was really interesting and a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, as I worked on this project though, and as I performed it, I realized that I pretty much like didn't have, I don't know, I felt like I didn't really I wasn't really in the right mind space to actually do this project. So yeah, and this is like, see, this is the projections. But then that brought me to Clarity, which was it's a virtual reality project where I'm looking at my childhood, but I'm also looking at my connection to my higher self. So it's basically like this 3-part project that I'm still working on, and what I'm going to do is sort of take people on this journey of my inner healing. So that's like one of the pictures of my inner child right now. So that's me in the mocap suit, and basically all of the emotions are going to be taken from me. So when you're in this space, in virtual reality, you'll be interacting with a part of me from a different type of space. So this is just me being extra, like with motion capture. But but if you could imagine, I guess, sort of building a relationship with a part of me that's extracted from like back in time. This is one of the scenes from the experience. It's a cave, and the crystals are they're interactive. Like when you touch them, they create sounds. Yeah. And then each part of this sort of takes you through like all of these different, I guess, majestic spaces. And this is a video of my higher self. So. To create all the animations for this though, I was basically playing with the physics in the engine. I was really interested in how I could, I guess, change the way that I could, change the way that I would move from a higher self perspective, because I don't think I would be doing the same types of movements that my inner child would. So it's how can you, I guess, interact with both of those beings, but in different ways? A lot of this work sort of brought me into, I guess, a more community space. There's another video. I actually ended up becoming a director of figure skating because I grew up figure skating. So I guess I've always had a relationship to movement. And I ended up doing a show with these girls in the program. And they all basically coded some of their props, and then they also added lights into their dresses. And basically the show was called Black Ice, and it was taking you through all of these different dance genres through time. And what was great about it was you could see their connection to the ice in a different way. When it comes to figure skating, it's just pretty much like a white dominated sport. So for them to have connected to the ice in a more what's the word? For them to connect to the ice in a different way, to bring themselves onto the ice, I think was very important. And yeah, this is one of the seniors. So she skated to, she skated to this, and then if you could just fast forward just a little bit to the middle. But this is my favorite part, where they all came out with their lights. Yeah, some of them had boot covers, some of them had dresses, some of them had umbrellas. Yeah. But it's really, I guess, gotten me to this space where I just want to bring a lot of people with me on my journey. I want to see exactly the things that I can make, but also create a space where I can teach others, and also I guess build with them, and we can reimagine a future together. That's it for me. So, okay.
Thank you. Thank you. So from, I guess, maybe a more human representation of cyborgs and motion capture, I think we're going to take the discussion now to the relationship between the nature and the fabrication and technology. With Pam, do you want me to?
Do you mind if I just sit? It's like.
Yeah.
Hi everyone. Hello everyone, my name is Pam, and I'm talking today about the places between digital and material, the moments in which material logic can encode something digital, and storage and memory as well. So this image here, I was wondering if you could just kind of throw out some ideas for what it could possibly be. Copper wires, yes. Any other guesses? Straw.
Straw?
It's no, it is wires.
It's all wires, it's all metal. What do you think it might do? Is it a tapestry? Is it art? It's actually the NASA lunar guidance system from the 60s. Software was physically woven on core rope memory. So ferrite cores storing zeros and ones, storing the actual digital logic of the astronauts and their spacecraft moving into space, was hand-strung on copper wire and ferrite cores. So the software, this logic, was actually physical. And the analogy I find between textiles, the concurrency between the history of textiles, the history of human language, and the history of human cognition kind of run concurrently with computation. So the first notion of why we might clothe ourselves. Everyone here has something in common. Hopefully, we're all dressed. So hopefully we're all wearing clothes. And why is that? Why is it that as human beings, we, for the most part, with some exceptions, that we must wear something in order to exist in civilization, organize ourselves around societies? One of the earlier notions of clothing was thermoregulatory theory, which is basically as human beings migrated to more inclement weather, that they had to endure more cold, wind, and in doing so, they needed to augment onto their person physical layer in order to adapt to different climate. However, that seems to be not necessarily the case. From learning about the sequencing of lice, actually human lice that exists mostly in skin. So there was a schism in the lice community. Basically, there is a form of lice that only invades human textiles. And from looking at their DNA, they're able to determine that textiles, human textiles, started around
130,000 years ago. So textiles predate language, written language, predate the wheel, predate so many different forms of ancient technology. They're one of the earliest forms of ancient technology, in fact. So why is it, this also predates a lot of the mass migration movements from early man to different parts of different continents. So something about textiles is intrinsically woven into our understanding of society and our understanding of language as well. And in this case, I believe computation as well. So what about textiles makes it so unique and such an incredible language for human communication? Well, this is a Polynesian star map. Essentially, different from other forms of human mark making, such as cuneiform or even writing on a piece of paper, knots are able to be done and undone. So this is a very early form of mutable human storage, the first eraser, so to speak. So in this Polynesian star map, they're able to create a navigation for naval uses. So they're able to actually mark down at the intersections where stars are, and then use this as a ledger for their journeys overseas. So in making corrections, they could easily, well, perhaps not easily, but using the materials at the ready, in this case, shells, raffia, bark, all different kinds of materials are used in these navigational charts. They're able to do and undo, store and unstore, write and read and delete. Here's another example. I find it to be really quite beautiful as well. This is called a kipa. This is a Peruvian ledger. So the Incans, early Incans, when doing complicated censuses. So essentially, Peru is has a very dynamic terrain, a lot of verticality, and in doing so, for creating a ledger of people and of their of populations, essentially like a count of how many people and where, for the Incan government. They had to create something of an Excel spreadsheet, but because of the terrain itself, they had to store it in a fashion that was amenable to running up hills, running through a lot of vegetation, and so their solution was these knots. So these knots on string were able to, a very ancient form of Excel, so a spreadsheet essentially, each one denoting a different category, using colors, using types of knots, using the placements of the knots, actually be able to store a huge amount of data about a rural population. So what makes fabric and textiles, the materiality, so amenable to this kind of storage? So this is a microscopic look at flax. So as you can see, like fiber itself is something that has many different kinds of edges, has many different kinds of tubular forms that allow it to be bent and not retain too much memory. So the same way we can tie our shoelace and it becomes undone. These multi-threaded yarns, they're able to be manipulated and also unmanipulated. This is a very basic drop spindle, so the technology for creating pretty complicated textiles actually doesn't involve too much in the way of like machinery with like very delicate tolerances and that sort of thing. So you can start to express yourself with very basic fabrication. This is a drop spindle. Does anyone spin? No? It's awesome. So when looking at the loom and looking at a woven textile, essentially what we're seeing is these intersections, a two-dimensional array of intersections. So in this case, we have a basic basket weave, over, under, over, under, under, over, under, over. alternating. And that's what creates like the basic basket weave pattern that we see. But if we see it another way, as under being 0 and over being 1, then you can start to encode information. And in fact, a lot of the textile drafting patterns enable this kind of binary, basic binary. The double woven loom, so the double weave backstrap loom, this is a very, very common practice. It's a double-sided 4-layer woven textile that is incredibly difficult woven pattern, but this complex mechanical geometry is achieved with actually very little in terms of tool making. So the tools themselves are, in this sense, different kinds of reeds that have been tied in different configurations. So there's the vertical and the horizontal, the longitudinal and the latitudinal. In the case of the traditional vertical loom, you have the vertical lines being the warp and the horizontal lines being the weft. So as the warp gets picked up in a different pattern, the shuttle, which has the yarn, shoots across this space that's generated in between called the shed. And that's what creates the pattern in textiles. Here's an example of how a basic loom works.
In this segment, we describe how filling yarn is actually inserted into the fabric. Several.
Okay.
This still takes up the same amount of floor space as a single rigid rapier because each rapier is stored on either side of the loom. However,
so as you can see, there's these different kinds of layers of petals that are picking up a different interval of warp threads, and then based on that, they're able to create this pattern.
Double flexible rapiers use a
So throughout civilization, there's using this like very, very, very expressive form of creation. There was this kind of understanding of textiles because textiles were generated inside the home. So textiles were something that were legible, something that the production of was something that people saw, something that was in their homes, in their municipalities, in their villages. And in doing so, it became a very useful mechanism for trade because in and of itself, it was a record of the labor that was involved and also self-evident of the techniques and suggestions of the machine that it was derived from. In a textile, you can see the supply chain of a civilization. You can see their ingenuity. You can understand sort of what their basic material resources are, all conveyed in a single form of fabric. The object itself and its performance stores the information and materializes a way of experiencing life. This is through a Speed Lane Pilgrim. So using textiles as a form of language, as a form of metaphor, because of its huge amount of coordination within society, it became an extremely useful metaphor in many different cultures for articulating their own sense of causality and in doing so shaping their cosmology. So the Chinese have a Valentine's Day. The Valentine's Day essentially is the story is you have the weaver and the shepherd, and it's based actually on the Milky Way. So one day a year, the idea is that these two star-crossed lovers who are forever separated by the cosmos, river of the Milky Way, that they are connected through a migration of magpies. And so the sort of the cosmos in themselves are kind of like, and that connection point too, is considered the actual woven fabric of the weaver. That the weaver, through her intention, she's able to bridge the gap of the cosmos. And this is really kind of indicative of just like how ingrained textile fabrication was in the ancient Chinese world. This is called the Tzolk'in. So the Tzolk'in is the alphanumeric system of the Mayan calendar. So it's a base 7 and base 13 number system. So we have a base 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. But the Tzolk'in was a 7 and 13 base system, specifically for the use of creating astrological calculations by the Aztecs. So the loom was the ultimate sort of articulation of this alphanumerical system. That brings me to the Jacquard loom. So the Jacquard loom is kind of the storied example, metaphor of computation kind of taking over craft and displacing the craftsperson. It's considered the first computer, the first mechanical computer, and in fact fueled the Napoleonic Wars, and has the term Luddite also is very much like derived from this history. So the difference of the Jacquard loom from the traditional loom that we saw is it uses punch cards to create the picture. So instead of repeating patterns, you can dial in exactly what pattern you want to see. So you can make pictographic forms. You can make a flower, you can make a face. It doesn't necessarily have to repeat. And yeah, you can get exactly what you want using like essentially zeros and ones. So that brings me to some of my work. I'm just going to go a little bit faster. So nowadays we have this kind of like using technology as a way to dial in a certain kind of image. Okay, cool. Yeah, so there's now these like turnkey systems, service bureaus, where you can generate image and then send it off to a loom, and essentially using Jacquard loom, print out different forms of images using a Jacquard loom. So on the left we see artist Phil Stearns and his glitch textiles. So he's taking different kind of glitch artifacts from the digital world and actually weaving them into a tapestry. And on the right we're seeing the Service Bureau's promotional website of photo weavers in North Carolina. So this is actually where you can, like, if your dog died or your grandpa died, make like this is actually what, like, the main reason people use this service is, like, you can make like these kind of commemorative blankets and have like a picture of your favorite dog or like so on and so forth. So generating a photograph and turning it into a woven artifact. And many artists are playing around with this, but it also obfuscates the process of weaving. So it turns the woven into the image. But let's remember, you know, the very first form of data storage, before we had the CD-ROM, before we had the floppy disk, before we had all these things, the word bit actually really comes from these tiny seed beads, these tiny ferrite cores that were hand strung, and their configuration allowed the storage of zeros and ones. So how does this work? I just wanted to tell you a little fun factoid. The very first Intel factory, the very first computer chip factory in the United States was on the Navajo reservation, specifically because of the hand skills of the Navajo seed beaters. They were so, they had already like tons of these skills that were necessary for stringing core memory from their traditional craft, that they were chosen as like the very first location for Intel in the United States. So here is a very famous, like the Intel 9040 chip. They asked Navajo weaver Mary Lou Schultz to weave an interpretation of the PCB in this case. And so you have this kind of like concurrent history of textiles and electronic memory. So how does ferrite work? So essentially, oh yeah. Okay, I'll just blast right through this. So this is just basic, some students working on making some ferrite core memory bracelets, friendship bracelets. But this is my main project, which is a desktop Jacquard loom, which is a dressable loom that you control with your computer to create different images. So essentially essentially the loom allows the user to input an image and then weave that image on a much smaller scale. And the idea was to sort of to get the individual weaver in the small textile studio with the Jacquard technology kind of come full circle, so that Jacquard and digital technology empowers the individual maker as opposed to kind of like taking away efficacy or infantilizing the creator in some way by removing tool making from their craft. Yeah. And this is a coat I made. It's really warm. Yeah, that's it. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Pam. Our last speaker, Sean, will, I think, actually similarly works with exposing the mechanism of kind of the apparatus. Take the floor.
Thank you for all the patient ones who stayed behind. I'll be quick, because I like quick. Okay, so, first of all, I tend to not understand really why all of the fuss is around visual fake, because we as human beings, we are hardwired to be visually faked, because our vision is fake by definition. Color is fake, movement is fake, visual, optical illusions are fake, and we are hardwired to indulge to those fake delights. This is a POV stick that also relies on the fact that it's a blinking LED stick that relies on the fact that our eyes complete a whole image while blinking very, very fast. Actually, we wouldn't have any screen to talk about if we wouldn't have fake as a visual method of doing stuff with. Also, we enjoy fake. Fake is fun. There's a whole gastronomy, people that do molecular gastronomy are all about fake. They're about making us enjoy the fact that what we see is not what we get. So this is like a cigar of some Mexican dish or a Cuban dish. It's like made to look like a cigar. Actually, when we talk about visual fake, I think that's, for me, the more intense fake we don't talk about at all is actually a sonoric fake. The biggest fake of all that people don't think about is the fact that all of the sound, almost all of the sound we hear while watching almost any movie is not the actual sound of the movie. And for that we have Foley people that do stupid stuff and take stupid objects, and also we could believe that we actually are seeing what is happening in the movie. I just move it a bit forward, maybe how do I do it? Do it like this. Okay. I'll just give you a small, okay. So this is what you experience in any movie you see. This is not something unique to a very specific movie. The funny thing, and there's actually a very nice video about it, is that even nature films, when you see like the elephants walking in Africa, that's also done with Foley. That's not the real elephants walking, that's some dude walking on sand with like big boots that are acting as if it's the voice of elephants. So it's not what you see is what you believe, it's what you hear is what you believe actually. And you can watch this at home. Foley. So I think in the fake world, what mostly worries me more than visual fake or even sonoric fake is fake beliefs, fake ideas, and fake values. So this is something just before I even start my talk, this is not even the beginning, it's just something I did. I asked people to shout something they believe in, and jump off a 3-meter ramp. Because I believe that, we tend to talk too much about what we believe in without even meaning it. We write it on Facebook, we put it on all sorts of mediums. And when you jump while doing it and kind of like risking your life, I actually almost broke my ankle doing that on the test before. So I think this is a way for me to take out the fake from, I think if you would, every time we would like say something we believe in, we would actually risk our lives in a way, like people used to do that before, so that would be much more affirmative. Okay, but actually what I want to talk about today is technology. Because, why technology, I'm talking about technology and fake, and the reason why technology is so important is because it's basically the main reason for us to be optimistic. I think the main reason why we believe that the world is going to a better place, while we are progressing in life, while we should look forward for a better future for our kids, is because of technology. Because we all know that people are not getting any better. We can say we are staying the same. Some would say we are getting worse. The surrounding around us, nature, we all know that's getting pretty bad. So the only thing we can rely on and being optimistic and having a really nice view on life is believing that technology is something that we could expect good of. Well, I will try to engage that in a few issues. First of all, we all believe, and if you say not, you're a liar, that technology is magic and it can do anything. And my best example for that is this. It's a work that was done by Rana Das, who's going to talk to you today later. It was done in a project I curated for Brain Tech Conference that dealt with brain and technology. You put on a EEG headset. It detects all sorts of like brainwaves, alpha, gamma, theta, and never mind. It takes some drawers of words and creates basically a poem out of your brainwaves. Now, it's not really fake. It's real. It's actually doing a real thing. But what was amazing about this project is what people actually believed that it was doing. People, because of suggestion, because poetry is something very fluid, and people just want to believe. People actually believe that this is like reading their minds. Now, nobody said to them that they obviously we can't read minds. Nobody can read minds. It's stupid. We are maybe 10 years from that. But people actually believed, and these were like scholars. All people that were there were people that were intelligent. Some of them were even from the dealing with brain and dealing with EEG and dealing with MRI and other stuff. But people wanted to believe that this poem that they were seeing, that I wouldn't say it was like accidental what happened. It derived from brain data, but it was far from it from reading any minds. But people want to believe. So, not magic. The second thing that people believe that technology works, and that's also not the fact some of the time. Everybody who has I don't know how you call it in English, a central air conditioning system knows that technology doesn't work. But this is another example. This is actually a work we did for a Fresh Paint conference. The work actually doesn't really matter, never mind. Well, you send an icon, you send an image, it's like a common sense of a big audience of people, like what they think about something, what they think about the situation they're in. It's a collage of people and their immediate thoughts, but what's interesting about it is that when we presented it first, was in a conference that actually preceded the actual fair, and we put it up. People started to throw their cell phones at the screen so that the words would appear, and this crashed. And then we restarted the computer and it crashed again. And then it crashed about 10 times. It was the most horrible moment in my life. I wanted to die. And you know, the funny thing is that it all happened because one woman there, she had a very awful combination of the fact that she decided to write a dot and a comma, one after the other before her word. That was one mistake that we didn't know that would do that, but fine. The other misfortunate thing is that she really wanted her word to appear. So she kept on throwing it again and again at the screen. So that's why the computer kept on crashing. So yeah, it doesn't really work. Sometimes it doesn't work at all, sometimes it works some of the time. This is another example, actually a good example of something that didn't work totally, but nobody cared. This was a real robot that we did very, very quickly for music. This is Marina she couldn't come, she was in Australia. We filmed her, we made a robot, and we told Kaelin that he could like play with through like a prime sense, like a 3D camera. Because of the smoke, it didn't work at all. The robot did whatever it wanted. There was no correlation between what it wanted it to do, or what Gilly wanted it to do, and what it actually did. But nobody cared because it was fun and music, and he's a cool guy, so we just played along. Okay, next thing about technology is that it's complicated. That's very tough one. This is a physical representation of a virtual computer game called what? Everybody wants to guess what game is it? This is Space Invaders, physical Space Invaders. 8 big laser cannon, big laser. But again, the interesting story is not about the work itself, it's about what surrounds it. Because we wanted it to be very, very high-tech. So we wanted like 8 drones to fly autonomously. That took a huge effort. But what we actually found out that nobody actually cares. Nobody actually cares. We call it the ייצוג law. The ייצוג law is that sometimes you create this very elaborate technology to create something very, very complex. We could actually invite an ייצוג to come. Sorry for ייצוgs in the audience. And you should actually invite an ייצוג to come and press a button and you're done. Nobody cares. You can do it in the most simplest way. What people care about is the experience, and here I think the most exciting thing was just to, shoot a laser gun, to be honest. What? We're very fast, we're very fast. The other thing is that actually, sometimes I use the fact that technology is considered to be complicated in order to do whatever I want. So this is an example of a work we did in Hansen House in Jerusalem, in which you send an SMS of a word to a sign, and it lights up in lights. It was about, personal expression in the physical sphere, and in Jerusalem it's especially important. So a lot of things, really funny things happen from it. Apparently, like "marry me" is like 7 words, so there was a lot of like marriage proposals. And we had this, which was very nice. I'm just doing it very fast here. And we also had this. So this is an area where actually people, like very rich people live, like filthy rich. So they sent us a letter from a lawyer saying that we have to like censor the sign. So we lied and we said that there's like a technological very limit to the amount of swears we can eliminate. Lie. But people believe that technology is very complicated, so whatever. And We told them, so they had to choose 100 swears that are the most horrible swears they could find. So there was a lot of talks in the municipality of Jerusalem about what was the 100 most horrible words. And it's complicated, you know, you need to Arab, English, Hebrew, and these are languages that swear a lot, at least the first two. And it was very funny, and they gave us a list. And the funny thing that happened from it is that one of the words they chose was Arab, because they didn't want people to write racist things. And we decided that the sign would say no, 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 which is like no, no, something like Hebrew. So every time you would write Arab to the sign, you would get the no, no, no. You wanted to fix, and you ended up there. Okay. So, what I think is actually important, and what's most interesting for me about fake and real, and this is like fake, real, and real fake, it actually derives from the theory of experience economy. Very interesting. They talk about that experience is going to be the main commodity of our new economy, which I believe in full-heartedly. And they say, okay, so what would be something worthwhile a lot of money? And they say that the measurement of a good experience would be its authenticity. So we would say, what is authentic and what is authenticity? And they said that it's a difference between real fake and fake real. So I'll try to explain it. And I was a big substitute, but okay. So real fake is something that we buy into as we know it's fake, but we love it. Like Disneyland, like Disney World. Because everybody knows it's fake, and it's fine. So we enjoy it even though it's fake. But fake real is something that somebody tries to convince us and to trick us into believe something that is not real is real, and then basically it's not really a lot of fun. So it's a lot about intention and expectation. And I could say it's the difference between this, which was actually, it's AI, blah, 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 painting was just sold for like more than $400,000. It's like a fake, Francis Bacon fake, AI computer generated, blah, blah, blah thing that I don't like so much. I think it's like the bad side of not authentic stuff. But and what Banksy did, which I don't necessarily like, but it has its authenticity. It's like, it was very authentic and very real in what it set up to do and what it actually did. I didn't like that it didn't shred all the way, but he said that he actually intended to shred it all the way, which brings us to the doesn't really work before. So, just very quick.
Tip of the day, don't buy your chainsaw.
I think fake, real, and real fake is all about expectations. What you expect from life.
Look what this people start their shoes with.
This is just like funny examples of people and what they expected to get from eBay and what they actually got. So I think, okay, because now I have to run short. So I'll send you, whoever wants it, I'll send you the presentation. I just want to leave you with one thing. I think that technology should be a platform on which we experiment, on which we broaden our horizons, on which we play around and do sometimes stupid stuff just because we can. So the only advice I would tell you, and this is not my advice, it's like Stefan Zeigmeister's advice, is seek uncomfort, because I think it doesn't matter if you expect good or expect bad. If you don't expect, or if you expect the unexpected, I think you will, it doesn't matter if it's real or fake, you will enjoy it in a way or learn from it in some sort of way. Thank you.